Are we live? I think we're live. Hello, Mark Atwood here. The Mark Atwood Show, Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. Today, contentious subject. I've done quite a few contentious things in my life and my time on this channel, but I tend to get shouted at most about when I've talked about carnivore diet and when I talked about this Tesla thing. Yes, I know this is expensive. It wasn't put up to say go and get it because it's $600. I put it up because they're doing something with the technology, and I think the more people that know about it, the better. And I think the more people that buy this stuff, those that can afford it, then that brings the price down. So I hope that's covered that off. Carnivore diet. The title of this is Carnivore Diet and Spirituality: The Cabbage Soup Dilemma. Right. Some of the nastiest comments and nastiest emails I've ever had have been from people following a video that I did a few months ago exploring the idea of the carnivore diet with Phil Escott. Phil is part of the Red Pill Revolution guys. If you've not caught those guys, look through my videos and find the interviews I did. They've written an amazing book. They've got a new book coming out soon. And they're a great bunch of men, right, who I have a lot of affinity with. And I want people to understand this channel is about exploring ideas. Okay, it's about exploring ideas that are positive for humanity. And that's why it's called Adventures in a Cosmic Suit. Originally Adventures in a Meat Suit, which is kind of appropriate for this video because it was called Adventures in a Meat Suit, for those that don't know, because we are spirits having a human experience. We are ghosts in meat suits. That's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in exploring ideas. And one of the key driver really for this channel is that I started waking up 32 years ago when I was in the UK military, and I realized that the government lies about everything. Okay, and that goes deep. This whole spiritual quarantine that we're in, this awakening journey, is really about us digging deep into ideas that we hold dear, that we cling to firmly. Okay. And one of those is diet. It's really fascinating to me how attached we are to diet because it affects every single part of us. It affects us obviously physically. You are what you eat. It affects us emotionally. It affects us spiritually as well. And if I look back through my life and I think about the way that I approached diet as a kid, my mum and dad used to go to a market twice a year and they'd buy half a cow and half a sheep and they put it into freezers. This was the cheapest way for us to eat. And then in the back of the garden, my dad would grow vegetables, and it was a big garden, and he'd grow vegetables all year round. Everybody did. In the 1970s, every garden down the street was full of vegetables because these, my dad and that generation, they grew up in the Second World War where they had to grow. Well, they grew up just after the Second World War when there was still rationing, and they had to grow their own vegetables. And that all ended as I was going into my teenage years, and Tesco's and Sainsbury's started popping up. And then instead of growing their own vegetables, people popped in the car, drove 10 miles, bought a load of stuff that had been imported from all over the world, stopped eating seasonally, stopped eating organic, and then since then there's been GMO, which is everywhere. What else was that? I mean, I remember as a teenager, I used to think that Flora margarine was healthy because Terry Wogan was advertising it on the TV, and it was low in monosaturated fat, and I'd be like, oh, that must be good. Back then, I used to put glucose in milk and drink that, thinking that was good for me. It's amazing I'm still here. I think, to be honest, the fact that I basically had a keto diet as a kid. I mean, I was showing a picture of myself at 11 years old to somebody yesterday, and I was like a rake. I was like I had a six pack. I was really, really fit. I think that's sustained me. But through my 20s, as in the 80s, I was a big fan of Morrissey and the Smiths and Meat is Murder, the album. That hit a chord with me. I love animals, right? I adore animals. And I felt this very strongly that I should be vegetarian, and I was vegetarian for a couple of years. Later on, I became vegan. Then I started experimenting with other things because I was really ill. You know, I got really, really ill. I was in hospital a couple of times. I've been in intensive care once, and nearly twice. And diet was the main focus of where things changed for me. And I did do a fast twice. I've done 2-week-long fasts in my life, and they changed my perspective on food completely and got me into the raw diet. I went vegan again. But every time I did that, I didn't feel good. And even last year, during this crazy time, I was listening to certain people on the internet who were saying, if you want to ascend, you've got to go vegan. And, you know, and I went and built 3 vegetable patches. I started growing my own stuff, and I was going completely vegan, salads every day. And yeah, I was losing weight at the time because I stopped eating bread, I think, and gluten and stuff like that. That's really the enemy as far as I'm concerned. And I know the vegan lobby, if you like, or vegans are very, I don't know, you could say the word militant about being vegan. And I don't want to offend any vegans. I'm not anti-vegan at all, right? I believe in free choice, 100% free choice. It's up to you. But I do want to explore the subject. So after the last chat I had with Phil, a lot of people put up comments about the spirituality aspect of this. And so I decided Phil and I started chatting. I said, got to get you back on the show to talk about this in more depth. And at the same time as Phil was talking to me about coming back on the show, JCK was, who's really an expert in diet, was going on a cabbage soup diet. And I've been in touch with her, and I thought this morning it was just like a perfect storm. So I'm going to welcome them to the show so that we can talk about this in depth. Hi, Phil.
How are you? Mate. You okay?
Yeah, good to see you again, mate.
Thanks for having me back on.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a good subject. And JC, how are you?
I'm okay. I'm a bit my buttocks have barely survived the cabbage soup diet for 2 days, and I remembered why I became carnivore in the first place. And I honestly feel you know about all of this, don't you? I started, I hope it's okay for me to just tell quickly my story with veganism and plant-based diet and all of that sort of stuff. I was a vegan for a good 4 years. Started off as because of when I was pregnant with my daughter, I just I turned off meat. I always wanted to be a vegan. Always. I admired vegans. I admired their what they stood for. I admired that they could, they could do this and with conviction and things like that. And I really, like you, Mark, I love animals, absolutely love animals. And I turned off meat completely when I was pregnant. But then I started doing fruitarian, started doing raw diet for a little bit. It was great, really cleansing. And then I turned to low-fat, high-carb, plant-based, whole food diet. And I loved it. And I loved cooking. And I was the best vegan cook you've ever seen. I made cheese from cashew nuts, and I did everything you could think of. I made pepperoni that tasted like pepperoni from oats, for crying out loud. You know, I did everything you can think of. And people, I was trying to push it on everyone. And I was into the politics behind it and all of that. And then something started happening around the 3rd year where I was constantly always in digestive distress, but I just ignored it. And going 4 or 5 times a day was normal for me. And then it became 6 times a day, then it became 7 times a day, and then it became 9 bowel movements a day. And it got to the point where I was bleeding, and I saw about 4 different gastroenterologists, and they all suspected I had ulcerative colitis. And I was like, what the hell? And it runs in my family. But because I thought, oh, isn't that from eating dairy? Don't people have that from eating dairy and meat and all of that sort of stuff? But apparently, as I dug deeper into it, I started seeing that it had a lot to do with all the fiber I was eating. And I started listening to Dr. Sean Baker, started looking at different stories of people who were recovering, like Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson. from their different things. And I started very slowly eating fish and eggs, and I felt so guilty. And then before you knew it, I was a closet carnivore. I was a closet carnivore. Even when I started my channel, I was a closet carnivore because I had all these big.
It's interesting you say the word closet, because you go in the closet because you don't want to get attacked by anybody. That's the only reason anybody hides in the closet, right? And there's something wrong with that fundamentally, isn't there, Phil?
There is. I would encourage people, if they haven't heard our last chat, so that we don't have to go over old ground. But my story's in there of recovery from rheumatoid arthritis 10 years ago, after I'd been vegetarian for 30 odd years and vegan for a year or so, and that really knocked me out, and trying to recover from that. And I always believed that. I wrote books on it. I wrote books about plant-based diets. And it's funny because when I looked at the comments from the last video, there were some wonderful comments. You have some great interaction on your vids, and I spent days typing after that. But so some similar things started to come up, I think, from people who hadn't actually listened to the interview, and from people who perhaps their cognitive bias was a bit challenged. But like you, I'm not against vegans. I don't have any issue. There's this idea that carnivores are one end and vegans are the other. I don't see that. I see a carnivorous diet as our basic ancestral diet that is probably the best elimination diet. I've stayed on it. If anything vegans said were true, or the mainstream, I'm not just having a go at them, but if anything they said were true, particularly how ill I went into it, having been carnivore now for 6 years, I would be dead. I wouldn't be thriving. And there were a lot of comments of like, oh, it's Phil's way or the highway. It's got to be his way. And absolutely not at all. I'm not dogmatic at all. I mean, my mistakes in diet brought me all my knowledge that I have, which is why I wrote my book, Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, because it took me through that process, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. And now all the guys in Human Unleashed, who I've met, and Mark, and you as well now, JCK. I've met all you guys because of this wonderful journey I've been on. But I did see some funny things. Could we just take a little moment just to clear up one thing? That everybody seemed to mention, even though we did address it last time. The only thing that I'm keen on is for people to have the information of what is the truth about diet and our ancestral diet and what makes us well. I don't want anybody to be at anybody's throats. And the problem with the vegan movement is that there's this huge emotional thing attached to animal cruelty. And to run through it very quickly, and it's an old topic, but in crop fields, you take away the whole environment, you destroy the hedgerows, you take the trees away, you till the soil, which is destructive as well. So there's nothing left. The animals are displaced. Then they get hit with pesticides, which, it's pesticide. It's not accidental. There's horrible death. They're very slow death, very nasty death. Then they get chewed up in combine harvesters. And we're not just talking about, snakes and mice that vegans seem to think you can probably ignore, but, Google deer caught in a combine header or whatever and see the photos of these poor creatures sucked ass first into the combine headers. There is not a compassionate diet. And if you believe in the climate hoax, regenerative animal farming is carbon neutral or even carbon negative. So that doesn't matter to me. I don't really believe in it. But even if you do, that's the way out, because if you put a cow on a pasture, they're restoring the environment. And it gets killed quickly by a bolt gun to the head. Nobody particularly likes that idea. I don't revel in it gleefully, but I think a lot of veganism comes from a fear of death. And there is this huge fear of their own death, a fear of animals' death. It is part of the cycle of nature. But if you want the least death and the least suffering at the same time, a carnivore diet is probably the way to go. And it's extraordinarily healing as well. We went through last time a lot of the myths about plants, the toxins in plants, and even broccoli, which didn't exist sort of more than 150 years ago. We never had it in our ancestry. It's got stuff in there that'll ruin your thyroid. Kale and spinach will fill you full of oxalates, all that kind of thing. Look, by all means, eat it. There's no militancy among carnivores at all. But when people say that they, this comment that just popped up here, I love animals too much, vegetarian for 34 years. And I was probably about that much. And I never thought about how many were killed in the crop deaths. And then now, when so many of the vegans are waking up to the nonsense that's going on, I'll try and keep this on YouTube and not get too much, too many buzzwords in here. But if you look at what's happening now with beef being banned, they're trying to ban livestock farming. They're trying to, Bill Gates is pushing us towards the plant-based diets and the fake meats, which are not meat at all. Just cell cultures. Surely you can see the process that's been happening. And just last week we were working on a chapter of in our new book, the Red Pill Food Revolution, and we go much deeper than we do in the last book, really, into what's happened and how actually crop agriculture paved the way for the rise of the psychopath. Because this created a situation on the land where people owned stuff and they could then control people with these plant-based diets. That came through religion, it came through control from our controllers, really. And it's very rare to find a psychopath in a hunter-gatherer society. Either they don't exist because they're more healthy, or they get drummed out because these sort of people are not tolerated in that kind of society. But now we've got, as we all know here, an enormous amount of psychopaths up the top. And these people are pushing plant-based diets. And, if you want to eat some veg, if you want to eat some fruits, absolutely fine by me. But if you look at ancestry, if you look at history, the work of Weston Price, finding that the more plants that indigenous tribes ate, even the seasonal plants, even the healthy seasonal plants, the more tooth decay they had, the more arthritis they had in old age. They were much healthier than us, obviously, on our Frankenstein diet. But then you look at, recently I saw this wonderful series of podcasts on the Tanzanian tribes, the Hadza, the Maasai, the Batwa, the something else I've forgotten. But, they had a picture of 6 generations there of the Maasai, and the old lady was 120, and she wasn't in a wheelchair like, oh, isn't she done well to get to 120? She was pogoing with the rest of the Maasai. Her daughter was 90. These people eat blood, milk, and meat. Now, all I say is look at the healing of this. And if you need it, it's there. If you want to eat any other diet, that's fine. But as long as you're educated, I don't pretend brandy's good for you, but I drink it, And funnily enough, I can now on a carnivore diet, which I never could when I was vegetarian, when they asked me all the time if I was an alcoholic, because my liver results were so awful. But now they're perfect, even though I drink brandy. Tallow, it's been shown in rat studies, is they can't give rats enough alcohol to blow up their livers when they're running on tallow, but you run them on seed oils and the liver blows up straight away. It's protective. I'm not saying we should all be alkies or even that alcohol's good, but it's an informed decision. And I think, in so much of what's going on at the moment, we need informed decision. And if not, they're going to take away our food. And if they do that, if they ban livestock farming, make no mistake, they will come for the vegetables and fruit as well. And they'll want to be feeding us grains and soy and all that kind of thing. And even a lot of vegans are not keen on that, I'm sure, because that's frankenfood. So, I think we should all be on board with this. Vegans, vegetarians, Mediterranean dietists, pescatarians, whatever you've tried. I've tried them all. None of us come to carnivory without thinking it's insane at some point. But when you actually understand physiology, you really look into the human physiology and you really look into the science of it and the amazing anecdotes that the vegans always say are useless anecdotes, the healing is absolutely spectacular. I've never seen anything like it. Worked with people with diets all my life, and it's absolutely astonishing. All the lies that we've been told. Your channel, Mark, is about blowing up all the myths around so many areas of life. And this is a huge one. It's such a shame that we're at each other's throats. There were comments last time. Most of them were wonderful, but there was a couple of ladies, one of them was saying that it was, she felt a sense of demonic, a demonic vibe about it. And then there was, that we're all running on adrenochrome because the animals are so terrified when they die. Well, I would think it's the least terrifying death. They drop dead in a field with a bolt gun. So the whole of nature runs on adrenochrome. Imagine being ripped to bits by a lion. I guess that fuels them with a lot of adrenaline. you know, there's a lot of strange things about this. And then, you know, all these myths about meat, about it causing cancer. And one popped up last time and said, oh, and I see you're losing your hair. Well, this is all about meat, you know? Well, you know, my hair, I lost my beloved 4-foot long dreadlocks during my last period of veganism after 30 years of plant-based. It was nothing to do with that. And I made a video a while ago of why carnivore dieters look like shit, you know, for a bit of clickbait. But when you see them, and you've got to take into account somebody's starting point, you know, I'm pretty happy with where I am. I'm 60 next year, and I don't know many other people with a flat stomach, you know, and it just absolutely works. But you know, I was a lot older 10 years ago when I was plant-based, for sure. But you've got to look at somebody's starting point and see these journeys and pay attention to the amount of vegan disaster videos on YouTube, to the deterioration among the vegan docs and how emaciated they are, because basically, you know, veganism is cannibalism because they're eating their own body. And again, it sounds like I'm bashing vegans. I'm not. Most of my clients are ex-vegans, you know, who are recovering. And I have vegan friends who are still vegan, and they're lovely and they're not militant. They think I'm a bit barking mad, and then some of them come over to it. And then a lot of them, even ones who sent me death threats, you know, they come along and they say, well, my joints have gone, my arse has blown up, my thyroid's destroyed, you know, and then we become friends, and then they realize what's going on. But just if we could all get together, guys, I'm not militant. It's not my way or the highway. I'm just pointing out that it's our basic ancestral human diet. We've known this. Ayurveda's known it. All the tribal cultures have known it. And if you go back to meat for a while, fatty ruminant meat that's eaten what it's supposed to eat, we're not talking about KFC and McDonald's, it exclusively with no vegetables. It's an extraordinary thing. But then again, I think, you know, I've covered that now, but to get into the more spiritual side is really fascinating, and where it's come from. And the people that I've seen, you know, on my podcast, 100% Carnivore and Beyond, that's on my website at pureactivity.net. There's some beautiful spiritual people there who've not only regained their health, their mental health, they got their bodily health back, but they've also got their spirituality back. And even like I experienced, which is a grounding of their awakenings, their existing awakenings. A friend of mine says something, and then I'll shut up after this one. But a friend of mine said something really amusing the other day. I'm planning to have on my podcast, my Red Pill Buddhist podcast. I'd like to get both of you on, by the way, soon. But he said, you know, I'm wondering about some of these gurus, he said, because, you know, when you go really plant-based, you do tend to get very kind of strange thoughts. And he said, I wonder, a lot of the times now, is it enlightenment or is it just malnutrition? And that did amuse me, because I see it in the community here, in my TM community here, you know, with the friends doing this transcendental meditation, and they're getting very sick as they get older. They get very feeble mentally. They get very easily offended, very upset, you know, and this is what the controllers have wanted. And this is what they do with plant-based diets. So that's my initial rant, guys.
Well, there's a lot there. JC?
Well, my interest, on having seen both sides, is now that I look at everything 12 months into my YouTube journey, is we're seeing the duality in everything, right? So we're seeing this division in everyone, that you're either this or you're that, you know, and that is used by the controllers. So this argument where, you know, you've got some people who wanted to, it never used to be called veganism, by the way. Back in the day, they just used to call them vegetarians. Okay, they were known as vegetarians. And it was always, you're either an pesco or an ovo, whatever, vegetarian, or you didn't eat any eggs at all and you just ate vegetables. They were just called vegetarians. This veganism word is a newish word, and it probably, when did it begin, Phil? Maybe the 80s, late 80s or something like that, 90s, something like that. This is all that was like anything, was taken over and used to divide society. So my thing comes back to whether you are carnivore or not. Like, and I found this in the carnivore community that I used to be part of just in Instagram. It was, as I said, I was a closet carnivore, so it was all complete strangers that I used to talk to. And you know, they were more about the health. And I have to say, they all looked fantastic, and they had amazing teeth, and they all looked hot. Okay, and I never saw a frail-looking, greyish skin, emaciated person among them. They were all looking amazing, and there is so much healing. But what I'm not pushing either one, and as you can see, I mean, fuck, the other day I had a whole heap of cabbage, and just got to say that just reinforced for me that as far as healing goes, that's not for me. And as much as I would love to be vegetarian or vegan, it's not for me. But having known all of this, I just want to say that on the spiritual side, first of all, you don't have to be vegan to ascend. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with purity of your heart and your intention and your you can't fake what's going on in your heart. Okay, you can be as dogmatic as you want to be and do all the right things in terms of new age and spirituality, etc., and then judge everyone, and that doesn't take you to ascension at all. So we kind of have to just, instead of this duality, come back to that place of neutrality. And I was talking about this the last week, about that 0 point. So even though your diet may be one type of food, so let's say just meat, that doesn't mean you have to be on one end of the spectrum as far as your spirituality goes. Does that make sense? I think that that's where people are getting it wrong. And I think also, Phil, you need to tell people about the whole idea of ahimsa and how, because for a lot of people who do follow that 0 point, that neutrality, they're basically following the tenets of like the Vedic traditions and the Hinduism and things like that, where they tend to be vegan. Okay, but if you were to talk about what is ahimsa and do no harm and things like that in terms of as a carnivore, then what does that mean? That's where people, I think, are getting really worked up about it and not understanding. How can they be a spiritual person and inflict death on something or be part of that suffering? That's where they're getting, I guess, steered in the wrong direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a video of carnivore diet and ahimsa, you know, which was actually, I was reading out an email, one of many emails, when I was put in touch by a mutual friend with a vegan sort of non-dual teacher. And he was vegan, and you know, it was, this friend of ours said, oh, he's very knowledgeable vegan and all of that, you know, and you must talk to him. Well, you know, there's a comment as well came up in the chat here about you know, how about vegans, about it, just the you know, the violence on it and whatever, and I could never eat meat and that kind of thing, and people can't. What can you do about people who can never eat meat? I have seen so many people who have said, and initially, I cannot eat meat, and then eventually, you know, they try it a little bit, and then again, a couple of months later, it's like, wow, now I'm in touch with my ancestral, you know, woman or man. This is the best food I've ever eaten. It takes a while. It also usually takes some time to get over the brainwashing, and the ahimsa angle of it is how much, where does the violence stop? When are you not responsible for it? You know, again, you have to come back to the crop deaths and the enormous amount of suffering that goes on there. You know, when you're looking at a loaf of bread or a quinoa salad, you're not seeing the fear in the animal's eyes that have been chewed up for that food. But believe me, there's been far more than have been chewed up, you know, or, well, they don't get chewed up through a carnivore diet. Now, somebody's saying, you know, pigs are badly treated. Yes. And we carnivores are very much against this awful factory farming, the pigs and the chickens. I don't eat pork. I don't eat chicken, because apart from the fact that it's very inflammatory because it hasn't been fed right, I think that's tremendous violence against animals, to feed them wrong and to coop them up in small cages. A grass-fed cow, there's no violence there in its life. The people who are farmers of these cows, they love them, but they also understand the cycle of nature. You know, people say, again, it's come up in the chat, if you know an animal, if you're friends with it, then you can't kill it and eat it. No, well, you can decide which ones are going to be pets and which ones aren't. But if you look at indigenous cultures, when they kill an animal, it's not cruelty, it's killing to eat. You know, the whole of nature isn't cruel, it's just nature. and they have tremendous respect for it. The celebration that happens when they come back with a kill, it's wonderful, you know, and it's very, very respectful, far more respectful than a vegan who is in a high-rise block of flats, you know, that we mentioned last time, I think, who's never been on a farm, and they don't understand what's going on.
Well, I'm going to interject on that one, because I was in the middle of going through. I was like basically on a raw vegan diet, and I went to a ceremony, a peyote ceremony run by a Mexican chief in a wigwam. And in the morning after the ceremony, we all woke up. Well, we didn't wake up because we didn't go to sleep, but we got up and went outside and we had a feast. And to my amazement, in this feast was some buffalo. And I was looking at my other raw vegan friends who were tucking into this buffalo going, what's going on? I was really confused. And he said, no, this is okay, because there's reverence given to the animal. And then I got into a conversation with the chief about, you know, what's going on here. I thought this was all like full of vegans. And they were like, no, meat's part of our diet. This of course it is. You know, this is, but and I think because we're in this society, which compared to my childhood, where it's all packaged supermarket stuff and there's this disconnection completely from the animal, you've got people not understanding all the things that you've just said, and then being polarized, as JC said. And it seems to me very clear that, you know, I said something very controversial on one of my social media channels the other day, and I said, is veganism satanic? And people would go, vegans aren't Satanists. I didn't say vegans are Satanists. I said, is veganism, the idea, the same as BLM, Antifa, divisive, run by because our controllers are satanic, and they know exactly how to create division. Divide and conquer is what it's all about. And we're not in a perfect world right now. Not everybody can go and find grass-fed cattle, but you can turn off battery-fed or battery-farmed animals. You can make those choices, because it's choice and consequence. And I think it's really, really important people understand that. And there are low oxalate vegetables that you may be able to eat if you don't want to cut that out. But it's all personal choice. And the personal choice is based upon having good information. And that's why I wanted to get you two on, because there's good information here, especially the life experiences that all three of us have had to come to. If you told me 10 years ago I'd be online talking about carnivore being a good diet, I'd be like, are you crazy? What are you talking about? I'm a raw vegan. Are you insane? Sorry, JC, go on.
I was just going to say, 1 year ago, even, I remember when I first met you, and there you were making all your little oxalate soups. And I was thinking, there's a little bit of oxalates in there. And I felt really bad, because I didn't want to enforce my knowledge. And then the other day when I made cabbage soup, I was showing Mark, and he's like, all I see is oxalates. So I was like, he goes, why are you eating? You're the one who told me about the oxalates. And I was like, I just want to try.
Yeah, but then what did I do? I went and I thought, okay, I'll try this. Is interesting. I'll go buy a cabbage, just because I've been eating meat solidly for 3 months now, and my thumb problem has healed. I've never felt more energetic. I've lost weight. I feel my teeth are solid. Everything's working. All my nails are strong. Everything's stronger, right? And I thought, I saw JC do this cabbage soup thing, and I thought, I'll give that a go. I've still got a few lines. You know, you kind of flip back. I had 2 bowls of cabbage soup, and I have not stopped fasting for 3 days, and it's not been comfortable. Right?
That is the problem, isn't it? You know, this is just one of the things that people don't say. This, you know, you see the vegan docs saying, well, farting's natural, you know, and one of them even said it's because we chew up air and swallow that. It's nothing to do with the fermentation. No. And that was Dr. Clapper. He's hilarious.
Oh.
And I thought, well, that's funny. And then old Tristan Haggard on Primal Edge Health, my friend Tristan, he made this video, and he was saying, yeah, well, of course, make sure to deflate your lettuce before you eat it. That's insane. You know, you're swallowing just as much air with steak, and you don't get any gas at all. But something popped up here in the chat that I just wanted to address quickly, because so many people think this. We addressed the blood type diet myth in the last video.
Yeah,
but
it's a myth.
The acidic alkaline thing, you know, it is an absolute myth. This is not how the body works. You can alkalize the gut, if you drink a load of baking soda or something, and you don't want to do that because then you're just ruining your digestion. You need that high acidic thing, and meat is supposed to be the most acidic thing. But isn't it funny that it cures all of the things when you eat it exclusively that meat's supposed to cause? The body doesn't work like that. It regulates its own pH. It's a complete myth. But yeah, I think there's so many things that come up about this. It's hard. So many things are in my head of like, let's blow up this myth, let's blow up that one, and trying to stick to the spiritual side of it. But I feel, and a lot of other people have felt who've gone carnivore, just far more of a connection with the planet, more of an understanding of the planet, more of an understanding of how nature works, how the environment works, not just animals, and how really we're heading down the wrong path there. Every civilization has, since we started farming, 10,000 years ago, sorry, and the brains shrunk, the stature of people went down, the diseases started to come in with all the grain-based diets. Ever since that, civilizations have fallen because the soil has fallen, and they keep going out, they keep pushing out, trying to conquer other places and whatever. Oh, the soil's good here, and eventually the soil gets destroyed if you're not using proper animal agriculture. This is how nature always had it. They always had big herds roaming on the land. We took what we needed. We didn't rape the land. We didn't take 10 buffalo because 9 of them would have rotted. We didn't ruin the land. There are too many of us now, and the vegans say that, and they're quite right to feed them plant-based diets. Actually, you could feed the whole world on grazed animals. You could do. There is enough land, because a lot of it is perfectly fine for grazing, but it's no good for agriculture. I'm not naive enough to think we're ever going to do that, but we need to really wake up of what's going on. And also the business of plant toxins. I wish vegans would look into this. Like Jeremy Ayres says, I love the way he puts this, that all food is an assault on the body. That's why fasting is so brilliant, so healing. When you don't eat, you get incredible healing. But the least of an assault is meat, and really fatty meat, not so much protein. It's not a high protein diet. It's a very high fat diet for healing the gut, for healing these chronic diseases. And every single plant, not just oxalates, there's sort of hundreds of these toxins that are in plants. And some of them, even like in broccoli, some of them even occur when you chew them because they mix into other toxins. And, if somebody understood this, I would by all means go eat them if you like them. I don't like them, so I was glad to see the back of them. But, there are those toxins, and there's lots of them in all sorts of vegetables. The sort of stalk and leaf type vegetables, are particularly full of them, because the plant doesn't want us to eat that. They want us to eat fruit. So seasonally, that's fine. You may lose your teeth at 105 rather than 120 if you eat too many berries in the autumn, but you won't get cancer. You won't get autoimmunity, but we don't need them. We don't need any fruit. Everything's in meat, particularly if you eat the organs. And it's the least assault on the body. That's all. So, have a look, guys. If you're plant-based, by all means enjoy it. But if some symptom comes up, trace it back. If the thyroid goes, have a look at if you're eating too many goitrogens in cauliflower, in broccoli. If you have kidney stones, look at if you're eating too much spinach. Look, it's not just avoiding oxalates. Even the vegans are pretty much onto oxalates now. But there are toxins in everything. Not everything will kill you, and we had them seasonally, so the body would detox from these toxins in between when they were given to you again. But now we're eating all the way through the winter from different countries, and it's not what nature intended.
It's all out of balance, right?
Yeah.
And balance is the key to all of this. But coming back to the original point, I said that a year ago, and JC's mentioned that as well. There are a huge amount of people who have big followings, who say they're deep into meditation, they're highly connected to God, to source, that they are downloading information from the Palladians, from Ashtar, etc., saying you have to go vegan, otherwise you're really going to suffer, you're not going to ascend, and all of this. And it puts the fear of God into people, and it did with me, and I was like, oh God, I'm doing it all wrong. I need to eat more vegetables from the garden day and night, and that's a lot of these people, and I'm not putting them down. I'm just like, I'm interested in why they're coming to that conclusion.
It's because it's been co-opted constantly. It's just like for the greater good now that we're supposed to, you know, get arm raped down at the surgery or whatever, and it's for the greater good. And we're told this, you know, this is for the greater good. We need to eat veganism. We need to go towards veganism to save the planet and the CO2 and all this nonsense. And so it's with a great heart that people go into veganism. And I've got an open mind. I'm very, very curious about everything. And I was still fooled for 35 years.
That's the same as socialism, right? People go into socialism with a good heart because they don't want to see any more people suffering. They don't want to see homeless people. They don't want to see anybody being, what's the word? When you don't like somebody.
In poverty.
It's discriminated against, right? So it sounds great, right? Socialism sounds great, but it doesn't work, does it? It's completely balanced. And the other thing about socialism is it takes away market forces, right? Market forces is another way of saying balance, because market forces equals balance, supply and demand. And I think somebody said in the comments, back in the day, the indigenous tribes, it was an energy exchange. You took what you needed and you didn't take any more. And that's what we need to get back to. And that's the future. I mean, maybe in 5D we don't have to eat anything. I don't know. It'd be great, wouldn't it? We could all be. But you know, it's all about balance.
I believe that's possible. That breatharian thing. I believe it's possible.
I think it is. Yeah, it is.
They're in such a state of consciousness to be able to do that already. You know, but and then you get some vegan who's just gone into it from the emotional side and seen a few videos, those terrible lying videos like Game Changers and Forks Over Knives and Cowspiracy and things like that. And they've seen that and they go vegan and then they go fruitarian and then they decide that they can be breatharian and it's not working. They haven't got the consciousness for it. Might be possible, but that's like somebody, you know, going up against a world champion weightlifter and trying to shift 1,000 pounds off the ground. It doesn't work. Sorry, JC, carry on.
I was just going to say, I'm going to take a slightly different approach from the political or from the approach of it's them that's doing it to us and that sort of, you know, or it's been co-opted. We already know that's been co-opted, but let's talk about the real people going through this and about real diets. So for having come from quite an extreme background where I thought I was helping people by trying to explain to them how veganism is really important, how we shouldn't be eating animals. And I was the horrible person at Christmas saying, I can't believe you're eating that, you know, to everyone and trying to force them to eat the fake turkey, the vegan turkey that I made out of walnuts and I made it out of walnuts and tofu and things like that. Okay, so so instead of going from that angle, what I want to say is I've literally come to the point of you must allow. It's like live and let live. Okay, so we rather than talking about it from a political stance, we know. Let's all agree on this: vegans, omnivores, carnivores. Let's all agree on this. Processed food is the killer, okay? Processed food is the killer. If you can at least come to that conclusion, that processed food and modern grains and grain farming and the way it's being fed to us is the killer, okay? Let's clear that up. And anything that's processed is
seed
not
oils.
good.
Seed oils.
Seed oils.
Poison on the planet.
Rapeseed or canola oil is the worst thing, and it's in everything, okay? And it's definitely in fake meat. It's definitely in vegan meat. You just have a look at it's in your hummus that you buy ready-made in the shop, all that canola oil in there. That is like the worst thing. So seed oils and things like that. So what most people, if you are suffering from something that is, if you've got mental health issues and you've been a vegan or a vegetarian for a very long time, you may consider that you may need some animal fats. You may need, you know, have a think about it. There might be some things that you need to add to your diet, cod liver oil or cod livers or something of that nature, okay? I just think that I am now at a point where I will not talk anyone out of being a vegan. I will never talk them out of that because I think that they are coming from a good place. They are coming from a good place and they are genuinely genuinely believe, and I think everyone, as long as, people who are actually conscious of their diet, they're coming from a good place. I honestly do not believe, I have seen, unfortunately, there's a lot of very popular carnivores on YouTube. There was some really, the ones that went viral, and they were sitting there eating the raw meat and stuff like that in front of people and trying to antagonize vegans. That's not what people are about. What's his name? I can't pronounce. The guy from Lithuania. What's his name?
Sverrier.
Yeah, Sverrier. Yeah. And trying to antagonize, and he's that's the kind of bad look that we don't want, right? But what I want to say is that this division is not helping anyone. So if we just sort of take it away from the political stuff and let's talk about spirituality, and why is it that last week, when I was hell-bent on doing the cabbage soup diet, and I wanted to see if I could do a fasting regime where I did some juices and vegetable juices, even though I knew all the stuff about oxalates and I suffered heavily from kidney stones and all of that stuff, and I knew all about it. Why is it that I'm in the middle of a healing session, and this was a very, very good healing session where no interference, no external archonic interference in the way we do this healing session, and while the lady's working on me, I'm getting a message from my guides as they're working on me saying, you need to go carnivore. And I'm going, no, not back at carnivore again. And they're going, you need to go carnivore, you need to do fasting again, and this is going to heal these issues that you've got. Okay, so if we've got all these people who are, I'm rambling and I'm going all over the place, but if we've got all these people who are supposedly channeling information from Pleiadians, etc., and they're saying you must go vegan, all I can say is that may be a biased thing from that particular person who's channeling the information. My belief is that you must follow your own intuition, where you are at, and allow people to live and let live. One of the biggest lessons I learned in this past week was that when you love someone, you set them free. You literally just have to allow, and this goes for your children, this goes for your parents, this goes for your lover, this goes for your husband or wife. You must allow the other person to go on their journey, and this includes their diet. You must allow them to experience what they need to experience without enforcing upon them what you believe is true. Now, education is a different thing. You may present them with information. So same with the jabs, right? So you're anti-vax, you're like, no, my child over my dead body, they're going to get this. Instead of having that approach, you need to have, especially if they're old enough, maybe have a more gentle approach and say, can I show you this information? And the same goes for diet, okay? So may I show you some of this information and come from that sort of point of view. But the bottom line is, enforcing your information or your belief on another person is interfering with their karma, and it's interfering with their journey, and that is not what we're here to do. Okay, and then people will say, well, what about the karma of killing animals? Well, again, Phil, you've already explained all of this. You're actually killing animals when you're partaking in a heavy grain or crop diet. So everything is out of balance at the moment.
Absolutely. And I want to introduce something here, but just one quick thing here. Only fruit oils are acceptable. Olive, avocado. Yeah, they're kind of neutral, although they do tend to, they tend to, what's the word? They ruin the hunger, satiation signals by messing about with leptin. They're not really that great. And I'll go on and say why in a roundabout way this way. Here's a really interesting one that I heard. I've been looking into sort of various things about deuterium, but also the Antarctica as well. And something really quite interesting came up in an interview that somebody was doing about deuterium. Deuterium is an extra isotope on the hydrogen molecule or whatever, and it creates heavy water. And our water on the planet is 155 parts per million, roughly, which doesn't, which kind of fills us with deuterium. And when the deuterium blows up the mitochondria in the cells, it causes all sorts of autoimmunity, cancer, all kinds. You manage to reduce that with deuterium depleted water, which is very expensive, unless you live in Antarctica or similar places with glacial water. Then it causes all sorts of issues. If you can get the deuterium depleted water, it's reversing cancer, all kinds. And the way to create deuterium depleted water in the cell is to take in really good quality animal fats. That creates deuterium depleted water itself in the cell. So that's how you hydrate, the same way as a camel hydrates, which is why a camel doesn't really age. You know, they can be 7 years old or 40 years old, and they can sell you any old, you know, a secondhand camel salesman must be worse than a secondhand car salesman, because it says, oh yeah, this one's only a couple of years old and it drops dead the next day. You can't really tell. It's very interesting. But in the, I think it was the 70s or so, before anybody was talking about deuterium, particularly as something to do with health, there was a farmer, and I believe he was in Switzerland or Sweden, was it? Anyway, I'm getting that. I can't remember the story exactly, but he was channeling somebody from one of these other galaxies. And so everybody's laughing at him, you know, as they always do with these people, which I don't, because I think there's some extraordinary wisdom in that. And he started talking about deuterium. And he said that his particular guide had said, he'd been talking to him and saying, well, how long do you live? And she was saying, well, about, you know, 3,000 of your years. And she was saying, he said, well, how old are you? Oh, I'm about 1,000 years old. And she said, there's two reasons why you don't live that long on this planet. And that's that the magnetic field is messed up on the planet. And there's one little molecule here. There's one little molecule called deuterium that is stopping you living to these huge ages. And I thought that was really fascinating, because now, having looked into it, we have a good friend called Dr. Laszlo Boros, who's a wonderful guy, and he's the leading researcher into deuterium in the world. We've got him on interviews on The Human Unleashed. You know, deuterium comes in from, well, plant sources, basically, you know, fruit especially, that kind of thing. But sunlight depletes it, so that nature knows when to give it to you. But he came up with a real blinder that when you take in seed oils, that also contains deuterium, then the body has no way of getting rid of it. And so this is why they're so carcinogenic, which a lot of people are not getting onto. They think it's just because of the PUFAs and whatever in there, but they are that evil, these seed oils. As somebody pointed out in the chat, they're just designed as machine lubricant. But anyway, this deuterium thing is very interesting, because then somebody else was talking about how they got a job in Antarctica, and they'd gone there. They were all eating the same food, regular food, but the water in Antarctica is something like 80 to 90 parts per million, which is very low deuterium. All of a sudden, all these people were talking, you know, sitting around having lunch or whatever, eating the same old stuff, whatever that they'd eat. Suddenly, all their illnesses were clearing up. They're saying, oh, I got this kidney issue. Oh, it's gone. And my knees feels much better, and all this sort of thing. And it was to do probably with the deuterium depletion there, which they didn't understand what was going on at the time. But this lady, this researcher, had twigged onto it in later years. And I think this is a huge thing, the deuterium business, and it could be at the root of all of our illnesses. And then when you also look at carnivory from that angle, it is the lowest deuterium diet you can eat. And vegans don't know about that. Most carnivores don't know about that. We've been lucky to go down that rabbit hole, you know, via Jack Cruz and, you know, Graham translating Jack Cruz into English for me or whatever, because he's difficult to read. He's a good friend, but he's too scientific for my tiny brain. But you look at that, and suddenly it all falls into place. And you can see that, like plants, people go, oh, well, okay, the leaves are low deuterium. Yes, they are. The reproductive parts of the plants are high deuterium. But then again, you've got the toxins in the plant. So, you know, it's really understanding the structure of the food that we eat to understand why we might have some kind of a problem in the body. It's not a matter of telling anybody to do anything. You know, I don't tell, I'm not militant. All I do, you know, if somebody comes to me for a consult, which I do, that's my main income really. And they come to me when they've been broken on many different diets, but all those diets include plants. They're all plant-based. As far as I'm concerned, your regular omnivore is plant-based. The meat doesn't cure anything. It's just the least onslaught. You know, and when you've done that, then I see so much more stability, so much more strength. Something very interesting I was hearing, I don't know whether you guys listened to or probably discovered him way before me or even approve of old Cliff High. But I was listening to him the other day, and I mean, he's so knowledgeable on so many things. He's just fascinating dude to listen to. But he was mentioning all the seed oils and everything. But he was also mentioning how the plant-based diets have come through as brainwashing to all the sort of controllers and the psychopaths up the top from these sort of alien races. You know, he thinks that there might well be a big bug, one of these mantid creatures somewhere in Antarctica that they're still keeping, whether there is or not. His point is that animal fats protect you against the psychic influences of these beings and the psychopaths who are trying to fool you. I mean, when I look at my carnivore group on Facebook, there's 15,000 odd people in there. And all through all of this, they never swallowed the narrative. Nobody was arguing. There's the odd person pops up, one in a blue moon. On everybody else's pages, vegan pages, my page, you know, everything. But everyone's arguing and saying, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist and all that. But in the carnivore group, people seem to be seeing through it. It's a matter of having seen through the diet thing, and that's all rubbish. And that they've all healed all these thousands of people by eating the most dangerous diet on the planet that we're all told is carcinogenic and ruins the planet and all that. But they also saw through, I think, because their brains are working really well and they're not susceptible. And this is why people have pushed plant-based diets over the centuries, because it makes people susceptible and quite aggressive. And it makes them susceptible to suggestion of whatever it is they want them to believe about the narrative, whether it's, you know, a big preacher up there or whether it's the CNN or whatever. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
I was going to just bring up very quickly for anyone wanting to know about mental health and carnivory to look up Georgia Ede, Dr. Georgia Ede, EDE. And she is a psychiatrist who has studied the connection between diet and mental health. She's one of probably the only psychiatrists out there talking about it and how a mental deterioration in, for example, teenagers at the moment, where there's a big push for veganism with a lot of teenagers, is actually depleting their mental health. And also you mentioned, I forgot now, very quickly. So if anyone is also got diabetes or any blood sugar issues, completely eliminating carbohydrates. You have essential fatty acids, essential amino acids. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. So removing that, you will see dramatic changes and improvement in your blood sugar levels, in your body fat levels, and then that translates into your mental health improvements, because all of that is related. Blood sugar is, the type 3 diabetes is Alzheimer's, and that's basically, it is carbohydrates deteriorating the brain. Okay, it's blood sugar and high insulin deteriorating the brain. It has a number of causes, yes, including, you know, heavy metals, etc. But that is definitely something that it will improve. And you'll see all of these stories in any kind of carnivore or keto carnivore diets and groups. You'll see their dramatic changes and healing. And then it's up to you. I mean, all you can do is present this to people. Nobody's trying to divide anyone, but this is a solution for healing, 100%. And I wouldn't have believed it 2 years ago, ever.
You know, I found that the carnivores are the most educated people because they've been through every other diet, because it's the most insane one to end up on, isn't it? Absolutely the most insane.
Well, that's
Georgia Reed is brilliant.
It's the last frontier. It's the last frontier.
It is.
Isn't it?
Georgia Reed is brilliant on the plant toxins as well. If anybody wants to have a look at her, she's brilliant.
That's why I wanted to do this show, because, you know, it's a tough subject. You know, and I was reading. I mean, you know, a couple of things popped up for me there. Vegetables in supermarkets are the easiest things to infiltrate with other things that you want. I was reading the other day that they're even putting the V into vegetables in the US, but maybe here, right? But fluoride in the water, washing the vegetables in fluoride water, all of these things damage us, the pineal gland in particular. And I was also listening to somebody the other day talking about animal fat. You might expand on this, Phil, but when you've got animal fat in the brain, it protects your brain, and it creates this. I mean, I certainly felt calmer testing this carnivore diet, 100%, much calmer. Drank less, slept better, had more energy. You know, I started jogging the other week for the first time in ages. And I'm not saying it's just because I ate meat. I'm doing lots of things, but, you know, we've got to get over that. We've got to let go. So this is all about, as Jason said, it's the last frontier. All of this is about letting go of all these deeply cherished ideas, because most of the deeply cherished ideas in everybody's head were put there by the controllers. And once you fully understand, Cliff High talks about a bug. I think he's probably right. Satan, whatever you want to call it, that system of control that we've had imposed upon us in this 3D matrix has had one objective that I can see very, very clearly, and that is the weakening of the human race. And if you look back at the last 100 years, just the last 100 years of history, with the wars, this food, these systems that we've had in place, nobody can deny that the human race is weaker than it's ever been. And it's obvious. Just look around. Just look around at the kids today. Go look at the 10-year-olds now compared to 20, 30 years ago even. And even 20, 30 years ago, I remember my great-granddad taking the piss out of me for being weak then. Because he used to climb up church steeples when he was like 12 without a rope. I mean, it's a different breed of people. We've been deliberately weakened, and people need to understand. If you understand that, that's when you have to go, well, I've really got to look at this idea from every angle, because that's what this is about. It's about using your brain and intuition to come up with the least destructive path as we navigate through this. This is not a perfect world. That we are still surrounded by industrialized farming, and some animals, can you get grass-fed cows that have been humanely killed? It might be difficult. It might be expensive for some people, but every step you take towards doing that, and then it all becomes down into your anecdotal experience. It's like the chlorine dioxide situation. I'm having incredible results with chlorine dioxide. And anybody that asks me about it, where do I buy it? Where do I buy it? I just say, go to mmstestimonials.co and have a look, because you need to look at anecdotal stories, because that's the best thing that we've got. We can't trust anything that comes out of the mainstream media. We can't trust the news. We can't trust. It's all about anecdotal stories. Phil has a lifetime of anecdotal stories that led him at the age of 60 to be sat there talking about this. JC, same thing. We've all been vegans, right? We've all been there. We've been through every diet. I think between us, there's not a diet we haven't tried. I'm trying to think of one. I'm using, but I can't. And that's why we're discussing this now. And the spiritual side of it is very, very important to people who watch this channel, and it's very important to lots of people who are going through the awakening process. I don't know if you've answered that for people.
We can talk about this forever.
I know we could talk about this forever.
Mark, you were mentioning about the fats, and I think this is really important. I mean, Henny Penny here in the chat has come up and said, is seafood good? Can it be the sole meat? Yeah. Seafood is amazing. It is great for nerves. Somebody comes to me with MS, get them on a load of seafood, oysters, small oily fish. Fantastic. But as a sole meat in a balanced diet, no, it doesn't have enough fat. You've got to have those fats, and very high fat, particularly in the absence of carbohydrates. Otherwise, you'll get no energy. People who just eat protein end up with rabbit starvation. It's nice for a couple of months, gets you really ripped. You want to get your abs out, eat lean steak for a couple of months, but don't go beyond that. And then it's a sole meat in a balanced diet. What is a balanced diet? A balanced diet is what? Like some food and some crap. They say
that's part of the brainwashing.
It is balanced
of a balanced diet. This concept of 5 a day, it's coming.
The balanced diet.
It's coming. It's absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It comes from nonsense. They've just pulled it out their ass. It doesn't make any sense.
It's the food. It's the industrial food complex trying to sell. They had to say eat all of these foods, otherwise these industries that we've invested our money in and our pharmaceutical industries are not going.
It's more than that. It goes back to the bug. It goes back to the controllers, the Satanists behind all of this, because they want us dead, right? Or they want.
Mark, is it okay for me to mention black goo?
Yeah,
a little bit in relation to this. I'm starting, because I use myself as like an experiment and things like that, I'm starting to, and I'm seeing this in other people as well. And please don't, this is not to divide anyone or to demonize anyone, but I do get a sense that there are certain foods that people are consuming, usually very high carbohydrate foods, particularly processed carbohydrates, sugars, and things like that, that seem to be affecting our cells in such a way where I actually think that this is how these interferences from entities, archonic entities in the black goo are affecting those people, if that makes sense. And you and I were talking about this, Mark, about how MMS and turpentine and things like that are actually, DMSO are all kind of clearing out the cells. Yeah, and they're spiritual, and they're actually clearing out the cells and parasites, not just on a physical level, but on an energetic level. I think that people don't quite understand. They've been taught, brainwashed, a lot of things about meat and how there's parasites in it and this and that, but there is kind of, I guess, entities or other kind of metaphysical parasites going on with the food. And I think that the modern day diet as it stands is one of the things, anything that you find on the end of the supermarket aisles that they got for half price, avoid like the plague, I would say, because most of those things I think are being pushed by certain companies for a reason, to break down your cellular health and to allow you to be more susceptible, for example, to something like black goo, which is in the jab, I think. But when you go to a natural diet, sorry,
channel. I don't want to lose this one.
Oh, okay. But if you, just, be open-minded. Just be open-minded and just see. Now, if you really want to be plant-based but you're feeling like there's something not quite right about what's going on in your body with your diet, my personal opinion is maybe consider something like cod liver oil or cod livers. If you don't like the idea of eating that, then think about very small fish or something of that nature to start adding some kind of animal fat in your diet. But Phil is more the expert on this, and I think that you really, living on plant fats is just not enough for your brain. It just isn't.
No,
and
have you the beautiful stories of people's depression lifting? Just lovely stuff. I've got a couple on my podcast of some of these stories. Just people in tears as their depression lifts after years and years and years. There's something really important that popped up in the chat here that I just wanted to address, because it said, why do they say no red meat when you have cancer? Well, probably because they want you to die of cancer, in the short answer. But really, where did this come from? Let me explain this. I explained in our last podcast the absolute lunacy of how these plant-based diets came through from the Seventh-day Adventists and Harvey Kellogg and his anti-masturbation cornflakes and all of this kind of thing. And this lunatic girl, Ellen G. White, with her crazy visions of a Garden of Eden diet to get rid of all the sexual desire because this is so evil, all this nonsense, because she knew it would ruin, well, she didn't know probably, but it ruins your hormones. And yes, you do lose your sexual desire.
Yes, that's what they used to feed the inmates in mental health, mental institutions. They would take out all the meat.
Yeah, it keeps them down. But this business about red meat causing cancer, again, Georgia Reed got a great video called Who Says Meat Causes Cancer, and at WHO in capitals, because it's the WHO. They come up with these ridiculous statistics. They do these epidemiological studies on people who eat not just meat, but they'll be eating a McDonald's. The meat bit in the bun is probably the only bit that's okay for you. You got the bun, you got the seed oils, you got the nightshades in the potatoes, and then you got the double Coke. What's going to cause cancer? The little bit in the middle of the bun that we've eaten for millennia? No, it's got nothing to do with that. Where it came from, they're trying to pretend it comes from activating the mTOR pathway, which they say is carcinogenic. Now, the mTOR pathway is activated short term by red meat, and it's activated in the muscles. And if you exercise, this is a good thing. It's for growth. It's, if it gets too much, it's for overgrowth, and then cancer happens. And it's all down the same lines as deuterium. You get too much, the cells get confused, whatever. But I'm no great scientist on this, but I do, having listened to a lot of Paul Saladino, only about 1% of which goes in. But if you have a listen, somebody said Carnivore MD in the chat, and definitely listen to Paul Saladino if you want the absolute science on diet. It blows my head apart, but I just realized what to do, But Paul is very bright. He's got a brain the size of a planet, and he remembers all these studies. And the interesting thing for me was that mTOR is really activated when your insulin goes up. And that's when it's activated chronically and systemically. And that's when it'll cause cancer. And what boosts your insulin? All the carbohydrates and stuff and frankenfoods and seed oils and whatever and all that kind of crap. And, you know, as somebody, I've got to mention here, somebody put fluorescent lights do as much or even more damage than the fluoride in the water. They do more damage than the food as well. And you know, fluorescent lights, LED lights, all of this, you know, you got to get Graham on sometime to really go into the whole light.
Yeah, I asked him to. We need to do that.
It's fascinating. I'll leave him to that. But yeah, that totally disrupts all the hormones. Look at battery chickens kept under 24 hours artificial light. They lay all around the clock. And these are the animals that the vegans think the carnivores want to eat. No, we don't. We don't want those animals having that kind of suffering any more than they do. Now, that's how the whole business about meat causing cancer came about. We see cancer reversals on a carnivore diet all the time. Look in my YouTube channel, you can see pictures of my mother's breast cancer reversing on a carnivore diet and a £5 bottle of iodine, you know, and the whole thing's reversing, the skin coming back to normal. And it's just, it's not rocket science. And my whole thing is subtraction. You know, there's some great things that you're mentioning there, MMS and all sorts of other things. Iodine's very useful now and again. But most people, they come from the medical system and then they take all these crap supplements and then they stay just as ill, you know, because they're all full of fillers and they're all full of crap as well. And if you just subtract things, I mean, the ultimate subtraction is a dry fast, right? People are blowing up cancers and all sorts with an 11-day dry fast, which is supposed to be the magical number. But then all sorts of fasting protocols, you know, the ones that we're doing a lot in the Human Unleashed with the guys like Jeremy, you know, and going sort of 3 days fasting, 3 days eating, 3 days fasting. And this is incredible for kicking in autophagy and apoptosis, even more if you eat carnivore on the days when you eat. So, you know, all of these things, to me, it's subtraction. It's finding out what to subtract, whether it's bullshit, whether it's crap food, whether it's whatever. This is where the power comes in, not necessarily supplements, only if you really understand what's going on, if you do have a particular deficiency. And then they can be...
I wouldn't call iodine a supplement.
No.
It's been depleted from our food, and so we must, But gut permeability is very important when taking supplements, and gut permeability is cured with not eating plant toxins. So going to.
I mean, you know, one quick thing about iodine: if you've got Hashimoto's or even Graves' disease, and your endocrinologist is telling you that iodine is dangerous, really what you need is heroic doses of it. You know, seriously, sometimes, you know, like if you dribble a little watering can on a car, it's not going to hose the mud off. But if you blast it, it's going to get it off. You need to get all that stuff out of the thyroid. This was always the cure for any sort of goiter or whatever. People would understand this in the old medicine, even in the old Merck manuals. You know, and all these things are covered up, all the safe things, and they pretend that they're dangerous. Meat, iodine, everything.
I think that's a great spot to end it on, because I've got to go. But really great discussion. I'm sure there'll be more comments under the video. And I think to sum it up in one sentence, what would you say?
Don't believe anything you read. Take a food pyramid, turn it upside down, slice the top off. You know, if the doctor's telling you something, or the mainstream media are telling you anything about diet, if you do completely the opposite, you're probably 90% there.
Absolutely. JC?
My thing would be live and let live. But if you are having problems with your current diet, and you have already eliminated the processed foods and you've still got issues, especially with mental health and weight or blood sugar issues, consider researching and listening to the doctors who know what they're talking about when it comes to carnivory or keto carnivore diets. That's your starting point. That would be your starting point.
And definitely don't be put off by this spiritual thing. Really look into that, because I think that's so important. It's taking a load of people astray. You know, I mean, to say that you can't get enlightened if you eat meat is throwing away every ancestral culture, because they've all eaten meat. And in the areas where they lived the longest, it was nothing to do with plant-based diets. It was to do with low deuterium water. And that's really, and just their consciousness and the way that they form together as a society. So look into ancestry. If you're wondering about diet, just all I do is I say, what would I have eaten at this point on the planet at this time of year before we started farming grains? And you've pretty much got what you should be eating at that time of year to keep you healthy, seasonally and whatever. And it's as simple as that. And then you can ignore all the diet gurus, all the nonsense out there. Every culture has had its enlightened masters. They've all eaten meat. It's nonsense. Eat your meat, enjoy yourself, and eat whatever you want with it. And if you get sick, like JC says, look into plant toxins, look into what might be causing it, but don't get fooled by the spiritual side.
Well, I couldn't sum that up better myself. Thanks both for being on the show. Great to see you. Thanks for giving up your time. Thanks to everybody watching. Take care. See you soon.